Silence is information, not an insult. But most of us don't understand this at first. When someone ignores us, our mind immediately assumes the worst. We feel disrespected, unimportant, unwanted. We don't just notice the silence, we personalize it. And the moment we personalize it, the silence stops being neutral and starts becoming painful. Think about it. Silence itself has no emotion. It is neither good nor bad. It is simply the absence of words. But the mind is very uncomfortable with emptiness. So it rushes to fill that silence with stories. Stories like, they don't care about me anymore, or I am not worth their time, or I must have done something wrong. None of these may be true, yet the mind presents them as facts. And once we believe them, the pain feels real. The truth is, silence is not always rejection. Many times, silence is reflection. Sometimes people are overwhelmed. Sometimes they are tired. Sometimes they don't know what to say. Sometimes they are dealing with their own battles that have nothing to do with you. But because we see the world only from our own emotional lens, we forget that everyone else has a separate inner world. Imagine this simple example. You wave at someone you know, and they don't wave back. Immediately your heart sinks. You think, they ignored me. Later you realize they didn't even see you. The pain you felt was real, but the reason you assumed was false. The same thing happens with emotional silence. We feel hurt not because of what actually happened, but because of what we assumed happened. When someone ignores you, it feels personal, but most of the time it isn't. Silence is information about their state, not a judgment of your worth. It may be telling you they are confused, busy, emotionally unavailable, or simply incapable of communicating well. Silence often reveals more about the other person than about you. The problem begins when we treat silence as an insult. The moment we do that, our ego gets involved, and ego always wants to react. Ego wants answers immediately. Ego wants validation. Ego wants to be seen. So we double text, we over-explain, we replay conversations in our head, and sometimes we even react with anger or passive aggression. Not because we are bad people, but because we are hurting people. But here is a powerful shift. When you stop seeing silence as an insult, you stop reacting emotionally. You start observing. You ask yourself, what is this situation really telling me? Maybe it's telling you that this person does not have the emotional capacity you expected. Maybe it's telling you that you are investing more energy than the other person can give. Or maybe it's simply telling you that waiting is wiser than reacting. Silence also tests our inner stability. When someone responds quickly, we feel secure. When someone goes quiet, we feel shaky. Why? Because many of us unknowingly attach our self-worth to other people's responses. A reply makes us feel valued. No reply makes us feel invisible. But your worth was never meant to depend on notifications, messages, or attention. When you understand that silence is information, you begin to listen instead of react. You notice patterns. Is this silence occasional or consistent? Is it with everyone or only with you? Is it sudden or gradual? Silence gives clues. And those clues help you make better decisions about boundaries, expectations, and emotional investment. There is also wisdom in learning to sit with silence. Not every gap needs to be filled. Not every unanswered message needs a follow-up. Sometimes silence is giving you space to grow stronger emotionally. It is teaching you patience. It is teaching you self-respect. It is teaching you that your peace is more important than instant reassurance. When you don't react to silence, you take your power back. You stop chasing explanations. You stop demanding clarity from people who may not even understand themselves. You stop shrinking your dignity just to be acknowledged. And in that calm non-reaction, something beautiful happens. You feel lighter. This doesn't mean you become cold or uncaring. It means you become wise. You still feel, but you don't fall apart. You still care, but you don't beg. You still hope, but you don't obsess. You allow people to show you who they are through their actions or lack of actions. And you respond with awareness instead of impulse. Remember this: an insult is intentional. Silence is often unintentional. Don't give meaning where there may be none. Don't punish yourself emotionally for something that might have nothing to do with you. The more you understand silence, the less it controls you. And when you finally learn to read silence as information, not an insult, you grow emotionally mature. You stop reacting from hurt and start responding from strength. And that is the moment when silence loses its power over you. Your value does not decrease because someone ignores you. But emotionally, it often feels like it does. When someone stops responding, avoids eye contact, or suddenly goes quiet, the first thing that gets shaken is not the relationship, it is our self-worth. We begin to wonder if we said something wrong, if we are no longer interesting, or if we were never important to begin with. This is where most people suffer silently, because they confuse attention with value. From a young age, we are conditioned to measure our worth through reactions. Good grades get praise, good behavior gets approval, being noticed feels like being loved. Slowly, without realizing it, we start believing that being acknowledged equals being valuable. So when acknowledgement disappears, our mind jumps to one conclusion: something must be wrong with me. But this conclusion is not truth, it is conditioning. Your value is intrinsic. It existed before anyone noticed you, and it will exist even if everyone ignores you. Just like the sun does not stop shining because someone closes their eyes, your worth does not disappear because someone withdraws their attention. The problem is not that your value decreases, the problem is that you forget it. When someone ignores you, it triggers an old fear, the fear of being unimportant. This fear is deeply human. Nobody likes to feel invisible. But feeling invisible does not mean you are invisible. It only means that the person you are focused on is not capable or willing to see you in that moment. And that limitation belongs to them, not to you. Think about how many valuable things exist that everyone doesn't appreciate. A rare book might be ignored by someone who doesn't like reading. A deep conversation might feel boring to someone who prefers surface level talk. Does that reduce the value of the book or the depth of the conversation? No. It only reveals the preference or capacity of the observer. In the same way, when someone ignores you, it reveals their priorities, not your worth. Often, we make the mistake of giving one person the power to define us. One unread message, one unanswered call, one cold response. And suddenly, we question everything about ourselves. But ask yourself honestly, how logical is it to let one person's behavior outweigh your entire existence, your character, your efforts, your kindness, and your growth? If your value could really disappear so easily, then it was never solid to begin with. Another painful truth is this: people don't always ignore because you lack value. Sometimes they ignore because they know you have value they cannot match, handle, or reciprocate. Your presence may demand emotional effort they are not ready to give. Your honesty may make them uncomfortable. Your consistency may highlight their inconsistency, and instead of rising to your level, they choose distance. This is why self-respect becomes essential. Self-respect is the quiet understanding that you don't need to convince anyone of your worth. When someone ignores you, self-respect doesn't beg for attention or chase explanations. It simply says, "I know who I am," even if you don't. That inner knowing is what keeps you stable when external validation is missing. The more you tie your worth to how others treat you, the more control you give them over your emotional state. Today they reply, you feel confident. Tomorrow they don't, you feel insecure. This emotional dependency is exhausting. True confidence comes when your sense of value remains steady, regardless of external behavior. That steadiness is freedom. It is also important to understand that attention is not love, and responsiveness is not respect. Some people reply quickly, but care deeply only about themselves. Others may be slow or silent, yet still respect you in their own way. Human behavior is complex. Reducing your worth to someone's response time oversimplifies both them and you. When you start valuing yourself properly, something changes. You stop trying to prove your importance. You stop performing for acceptance. You stop explaining yourself excessively. You begin to move with quiet dignity. And interestingly, this is often when people start noticing you again. Not because you demanded attention, but because you stopped needing it. If someone ignores you, let that moment become a reminder, not a wound, a reminder to reconnect with yourself, a reminder to invest in people who reciprocate, a reminder that you are more than a reaction on someone else's screen. You are a complete person, with or without acknowledgement. Your value is constant. It does not rise with praise or fall with silence. It is not negotiable, not conditional, and not dependent on who chooses to see it. The day you truly understand this is the day ignoring loses its power over you. And in that understanding, you stand taller, not because someone noticed you, but because you finally noticed yourself. Most reactions are ego-driven, not wisdom-driven. And this is difficult to accept because none of us like to believe that our reactions come from ego. We prefer to think they come from honesty, self-respect, or strong emotions. But if we slow down and observe carefully, we will notice that many of our immediate reactions are not born from clarity. They are born from wounded pride. Ego is not always loud or arrogant. Very often, ego is subtle. It shows up as the need to be acknowledged, the need to be right, the need to be seen, and the need to feel important. So when someone ignores us, delays a response, or treats us indifferently, the ego feels threatened. And the ego does not like discomfort. It wants relief immediately, even if that relief comes through impulsive words or actions. This is why the urge to react feels so strong. You want to send another message. You want to confront. You want to demand an explanation. Or sometimes you want to withdraw dramatically so the other person feels guilty. These reactions feel justified in the moment, but if we are honest, they are not guided by wisdom. They are guided by the ego's hunger for validation. Wisdom, on the other hand, is calm. Wisdom is patient. Wisdom does not rush to respond just to protect self-image. Wisdom asks, is this reaction necessary? Ego asks, how do I feel better right now? Ego is concerned with immediate emotional comfort. Wisdom is concerned with long-term peace. When you react from ego, your goal is not understanding, it is relief. You want to release the discomfort you are feeling. But in doing so, you often create more problems. A rushed message can be misunderstood. A confrontational tone can escalate tension. A dramatic reaction can close doors that silence might have kept open. Ego may feel satisfied for a moment, but later you are left with regret. One of the clearest signs of ego-driven reaction is urgency. When you feel like you must respond immediately, when waiting feels unbearable, when silence makes you restless, that is ego. Ego equates delay with danger. It believes that if it does not act now, it will lose importance. Wisdom understands that time often brings clarity. Another sign of ego-driven reaction is the desire to control how others see you. You want to explain yourself so you are not misunderstood. You want to defend your intentions. You want to prove that you are not weak or irrelevant. But wisdom understands a difficult truth. You cannot control other people's perceptions, no matter how perfectly you explain yourself. Reacting from ego often comes with the thought, they should not treat me this way. While this may be true, reacting emotionally rarely teaches people how to treat you better. More often, it teaches them that your emotions are easy to disturb. Wisdom sets boundaries quietly. Ego demands respect loudly. Wisdom also understands that not every situation requires a response. Silence can be a response. Distance can be a response. Self-restraint can be a response. But ego feels that not reacting means losing. Ego believes that if you stay quiet, you are being weak. In reality, restraint requires far more strength than reaction. When you choose not to react, you are not suppressing your emotions, you are mastering them. You still feel hurt. You still feel disappointed. But you do not allow those feelings to drive your behavior. You give yourself space to process instead of exploding or imploding. This space is where wisdom lives. Another important difference between ego and wisdom is focus. Ego focuses on the other person, what they did, what they meant, how they should change. Wisdom focuses on you, how you respond, what you tolerate, and what you learn. Ego wants the world to behave differently. Wisdom wants you to grow regardless of how the world behaves. This does not mean you become passive or accept disrespect. It means you choose your responses consciously instead of automatically. You may still decide to speak, but you will speak from clarity, not from emotional turbulence. You may still walk away, but not in anger, rather in self-respect. The more you observe your reactions, the more you realize how often ego disguises itself as self-defense. It tells you that reacting proves strength. But true strength is emotional regulation. It is the ability to stay centered when triggered. It is the ability to pause, breathe, and choose wisely. Every time you resist an ego-driven reaction, you strengthen your inner stability. You teach yourself that you are not controlled by external behavior. You show yourself that your peace matters more than your pride. And slowly, you begin to respond rather than react. Wisdom does not rush. Wisdom does not shout. Wisdom does not chase validation. Wisdom waits, watches, and then acts, if action is even needed. When you start living from this space, other people's behavior loses its power over you. And that is the real freedom, when your inner state is no longer held hostage by someone else's actions. When ego steps back and wisdom steps forward, reactions fade and peace takes their place. People ignore for many reasons, rarely to hurt you, yet when it happens, our first instinct is to assume intention. We believe the silence is deliberate, calculated, and aimed directly at us. The mind says, they know what they're doing, and suddenly the situation feels personal and painful. But most human behavior is not as intentional as we imagine. It is often impulsive, overwhelmed, confused, or simply limited. Everyone is carrying an invisible load: deadlines, family responsibilities, emotional stress, unresolved inner conflicts. These things quietly consume attention and energy. When someone ignores a message or avoids a conversation, it is often because their mental space is full. Not because you don't matter, but because they are barely managing themselves. Silence, in many cases, is a symptom of overload, not a signal of rejection. We often overestimate how much other people are thinking about us. This is not an insult, it is a reality of human psychology. Just as you are focused on your own thoughts, worries, and emotions, others are absorbed in theirs. When they don't respond, it may simply be because you are not at the center of their attention at that moment. That does not mean you are unimportant, it means they are human. Another reason people ignore is emotional discomfort. Some people don't know how to express themselves clearly. They avoid conversations that feel heavy, confrontational, or emotionally demanding. Silence becomes their escape. Instead of saying, "I don't know what to say," or "I'm not ready to deal with this," they say nothing at all. This is not kindness, but it is not cruelty either. It is emotional immaturity. There are also times when people ignore because they fear vulnerability. Responding requires engagement, honesty, and sometimes accountability. Silence allows them to delay those responsibilities. Again, this reflects their inner struggle, not your worth. But when you take their silence personally, you end up carrying a burden that was never yours. Some people ignore because they are unsure about their feelings, unsure about the relationship, unsure about what they want. Instead of communicating uncertainty, they choose distance. It feels safer to stay quiet than to risk saying the wrong thing. Unfortunately, their silence leaves you guessing, and the mind fills the gap with self-blame. It is also important to accept that some people lack emotional skills. Just because someone is an adult does not mean they know how to handle emotions maturely. Many people were never taught how to communicate during discomfort. Silence becomes their default response, not because they want to hurt you, but because they don't know a better way to cope. When we assume harmful intent, we intensify our pain. We replay their silence as a deliberate act of disrespect. This creates anger, resentment, and a desire to react. But when you remember that most people are not out to hurt you, the emotional charge softens. You may still feel disappointed, but you don't feel attacked. Of course, there are times when silence is intentional. Sometimes people ignore to create distance, to assert control, or to avoid responsibility. But even then, the intention is usually self-protection, not punishment. Understanding this doesn't mean you accept the behavior, it means you stop internalizing it. A powerful shift happens when you stop asking, "Why are they doing this to me?" and start asking, "What might they be dealing with?" This doesn't excuse silence, but it creates emotional balance. Compassion replaces assumption, clarity replaces overthinking. When you understand that people ignore for many reasons, you stop making their behavior the center of your emotional world. You stop building stories that hurt you more than the silence itself. You begin to see that not every unanswered message is a message about your value. This perspective also helps you respond more wisely. Instead of reacting with hurt or anger, you give space. You allow time to reveal the truth. If the silence continues, it gives you information about compatibility, priorities, and emotional availability. If the silence breaks, it often comes with understanding. Most importantly, this understanding protects your peace. It prevents you from spiraling into unnecessary self-doubt. It reminds you that other people's behavior is shaped by their inner world, not by your inadequacy. When you release the assumption of harm, you release a heavy emotional weight. You become calmer, more grounded, and more compassionate toward others and toward yourself. And in that calmness, you gain the strength to choose how much access people have to your time, energy, and emotions. Silence, when understood correctly, stops being a personal attack and starts being a neutral signal. A signal that tells you more about where someone is in their life than where you stand in yours. And once you see it this way, ignoring loses its power to wound you deeply. Emotional maturity is choosing peace over proving a point. But this choice is not easy, especially when you feel misunderstood, ignored, or treated unfairly. The natural instinct is to explain yourself, to clarify, to defend your intentions. You want the other person to see your side, to acknowledge your feelings, to admit they were wrong. In that moment, proving your point feels like justice. It feels necessary, it feels like self-respect. But very often, it is the opposite. Proving a point usually comes from inner unrest. When you are calm and secure, you don't feel the urgency to convince anyone. The need to prove arises when your ego feels threatened, when your emotions are unsettled, and when you believe that being right will bring you relief. But being right does not always bring peace. Sometimes it brings exhaustion, distance, and regret. Emotional maturity is understanding that not every misunderstanding needs correction. Some people are not listening to understand, they are listening to respond, or not listening at all. In such situations, explaining yourself repeatedly does not create clarity, it drains your energy. Peace comes when you recognize where your words will be wasted and where silence will protect you. There is a deep difference between being heard and being understood. You can speak loudly and still not be understood. Emotional maturity accepts this reality. It accepts that some people will misunderstand you no matter how gently or clearly you speak. And instead of fighting this reality, maturity steps back and chooses calm over conflict. When you try to prove a point, you often enter a cycle of arguments. One explanation leads to another, one clarification invites another question. And slowly, the conversation shifts from understanding to winning. At that stage, peace has already been lost. Emotional maturity notices this shift early and decides not to participate. Choosing peace does not mean you are weak or passive. It means you value your inner stability more than external validation. It means you trust that the right people will understand you without force, and the wrong people do not deserve unlimited access to your emotional energy. There is also a quiet confidence in letting go of the need to be right. When you know who you are, you don't need to announce it. When your intentions are genuine, you don't need constant approval. Emotional maturity is rooted in self-trust. It says, I know my truth, even if you don't. Many conflicts continue not because the issue is big, but because both sides want the last word. Ego wants closure on its own terms. It wants acknowledgement. It wants victory. But peace does not come from victory over others. It comes from harmony within yourself. Sometimes walking away from an argument is the bravest thing you can do. Emotional maturity also understands timing. Not every moment is right for discussion. Not every person is in the emotional state to receive what you want to say. Choosing peace sometimes means waiting, and sometimes it means letting go entirely. Both require strength. When you stop proving your point, you free yourself from emotional turbulence. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop drafting imaginary responses. You stop wondering if you said enough. Peace creates mental space, and in that space, you reconnect with yourself. This does not mean suppressing your emotions. Emotional maturity allows feelings to exist without letting them control behavior. You can feel hurt and still remain calm. You can feel disappointed and still choose silence. You can feel misunderstood and still protect your peace. There is also wisdom in understanding that not everyone deserves an explanation. Explanations are a form of emotional investment. When someone consistently disrespects your feelings, dismisses your words, or ignores your boundaries, continuing to explain yourself does not heal the relationship, it weakens you. Emotional maturity recognizes when to stop giving access. Choosing peace often changes the dynamic. When you don't react, don't argue, and don't chase validation, people notice. Some may reflect. Some may feel uncomfortable. Some may drift away. But whatever happens, you remain centered. You are no longer pulled into emotional chaos. Over time, this choice reshapes your life. You attract calmer conversations. You build healthier boundaries. You experience fewer regrets. You sleep better. Your mind becomes quieter, all because you chose peace over proving a point. In the end, emotional maturity is not about winning arguments or being understood by everyone. It is about living in alignment with yourself. It is about knowing when to speak and when silence speaks louder. And most importantly, it is about protecting your inner peace. Because once peace is lost, no argument can truly make you whole again. Detachment is not coldness, it is self-respect. This is one of the most misunderstood ideas when it comes to emotional strength. Many people believe that if you detach, you stop caring. They think detachment means becoming distant, indifferent, or emotionally unavailable. But true detachment is not about shutting your heart, it is about protecting it. Detachment begins when you realize that caring deeply does not require clinging tightly. You can love, support, and value people without losing yourself in them. Coldness pushes people away out of fear or bitterness. Detachment simply steps back to create balance. One comes from emotional exhaustion, the other from emotional maturity. When someone ignores you, disappoints you, or fails to meet your expectations. Attachment makes you chase. It makes you overthink. It makes you replay conversations and question your worth. Detachment, on the other hand, allows you to pause and observe. It says, I see what is happening and I choose not to abandon myself because of it. Self-respect is at the core of detachment. Self-respect means you don't beg for attention, affection, or clarity. It means you don't lower your standards just to maintain a connection. Detachment allows you to care without compromising your dignity. You stop forcing connections that are meant to flow naturally. Many people fear detachment because they think it will make them lonely. But unhealthy attachment creates a deeper loneliness, one where you are constantly waiting, hoping, and adjusting yourself to be accepted. Detachment frees you from this cycle. It returns your focus to your own life, your own growth, and your own peace. Detachment does not mean you stop feeling. You still feel disappointment, sadness, and even longing. But those emotions do not control your actions. You don't act out of desperation. You don't send messages just to feel reassured. You allow feelings to pass without letting them define your self-worth. There is also a quiet confidence in detachment. When you are detached, you don't need constant reassurance. You trust that what is meant for you will not require you to lose yourself. You understand that relationships should add to your life, not consume it. This mindset naturally filters out people who only engage when it's convenient for them. Coldness is reactive. It comes from hurt. Detachment is intentional. It comes from awareness. Coldness builds walls to punish others. Detachment creates space to protect yourself. One isolates you emotionally. The other stabilizes you emotionally. Detachment also teaches you acceptance. You stop trying to change people. You stop hoping they will suddenly become more communicative, more available, or more considerate. You accept them as they are, and then decide how much access they deserve. This decision is not made in anger, but in clarity. When you practice detachment, you stop measuring your happiness by other people's behavior. Someone replies late, you remain calm. Someone changes, you adapt. Someone leaves, you grieve, but you don't collapse. Detachment gives you emotional independence. This does not mean you become distant from everyone. It means you become selective. You invest deeply where there is reciprocity. You pull back where there is imbalance. Detachment helps you conserve emotional energy for relationships that nourish you rather than drain you. People often misunderstand detachment because it looks like strength. When you don't react, don't chase, and don't complain, it can appear as if you don't care. But in reality, you care enough about yourself to not accept emotional chaos. You care enough to protect your peace. Detachment also reduces resentment. When you expect less from those who consistently give less, you stop feeling bitter. You stop feeling disappointed over and over again. You meet people where they are instead of where you wish they would be. This acceptance brings emotional relief. In the long run, detachment makes you more loving, not less. Because you are no longer loving from a place of need. You are loving from a place of fullness. You give because you want to, not because you fear losing someone. Detachment teaches you a powerful lesson. You can be kind without being available to disrespect. You can be compassionate without being consumed. You can be open without being unprotected. That balance is self-respect. And when self-respect becomes your foundation, you stop confusing intensity with love and attachment with loyalty. You stand steady, calm, and centered, not cold, not distant, just deeply rooted in your own worth.